Hi, I'm Katie Lukas, and I am here with the CTX Podcast from Cronin in Glastonbury, Connecticut. I am here in Stamford today with Ken Krasnow, who is the Vice President of Omnichannel Marketing at Henkel, and we are very excited to hear everything he has to say about customer experience and the culture that he's building at Henkel, which is pretty unusual for the kind of corporation that this is. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Ken and ask you to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Katie. It's wonderful to be with you today, and I'm very excited to chat with you. So I'm Ken Krasnow. I'm the Vice President, as Katie said, of Omnichannel Marketing here at Henkel. And my world really consists of all the consumer touch points in one group, which, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't really exist in any other major CPG company, consumer packaged goods company, from all the research that I've done. We've basically got 7 functions, right, in one team, all working together to create seamless yet nuanced messages from media to shelf.
Wow.
So the groups are what you would expect and some that you might not expect being together.
Right.
So the ones that you would expect would be, traditional media, digital marketing, shopper marketing, in-store merchandising, national promotions. The ones you might not expect would be the consumer call center, right? Visual branding, which is our packaging design team.
Right.
So if our consumer sees it, it comes through my team, right? And that way we're really able to stitch together stories that make sense. Stories that don't leave the consumer scratching their head feeling they just went down a dead end or their journey has been broken. And we're really proud of that. We have a long way to go in terms of, optimizing, this whole approach, but we're really proud of what we've established.
That's astounding, particularly given the number of brands that Henkel has. For those of us listening in, you might not know that Henkel has B2B brands like Loctite, but also all detergent. You have Persil, you have Schwarzkopf, just a tremendous number and variety of brands across 2 or 3 categories? 3 or 4?
It's really across 3 categories.
3 categories, right.
And you're absolutely right. Not a lot of people in this country really know Henkel. And they confuse us with the knife company,
right?
Which we are not.
Right.
Henkel is actually 140 years old, based in Dusseldorf, Germany, with products that span, to your point, across 3 distinct sectors:
right.
Laundry and home care with brands like All and Persil and Snuggle, and Soft Scrub and Combat. Beauty brands, to your point, Schwarzkopf, which we have from a professional salon perspective, but also from a consumer standpoint as well, with brands like Got2b and Ultime. And then there's our adhesive business, which is actually our largest piece of the business from a B2B perspective. Yes, there's the consumer Loctite brand, but we are in many different points of contact on your phone and in cars and on diapers, places that you wouldn't expect Henkel adhesives to be. In fact, a funny little story, 140 years ago, or, well, maybe not quite that long ago, but at one point in Henkel's history, they couldn't get the glue to close the soap boxes, right? The laundry detergent boxes, so they had to create a glue. And they created this marvelous product that happens to work better than any other glue on the market. And it has become the biggest part of Henkel's business, which is, Henkel's a $20 billion company globally, and this is the biggest part of the business.
Wow, I had no idea, and I can't believe I forgot Snuggle, because who can forget Snuggle? And Cronin actually does a little bit of business with the Loctite end of things, doing some social media, but the breadth of Henkel is something that I don't think most people are really aware of. And even I didn't know that the adhesives was such a strong part of Henkel. So that has got to be hugely challenging in terms of creating unified customer experiences, unified storytelling from end to end across all of these different brands. And we are going to get into that. But first, I would like to get a little bit more background about you and how you came to Henkel and how you grew into this role here.
Sure. Yeah, it's a unique role. And it's been an exciting journey for me. I actually started out on the agency side, working for a number of agencies right here in Connecticut, in Westport and Wilton and Stamford, lots of wonderful, wonderful firms. where I held a variety of roles across strategy and creative and account management, really diverse experience. And I had a wonderful time doing that until I decided to make the jump into corporate America. One of my clients at the time was PepsiCo, and so I knew that was a natural fit for me. I think they felt comfortable with me, and I spent just 17 years there.
Wow.
Doing a lot of diverse things across interrelated fields within marketing. So I got great experience in brand marketing, in shopper marketing, in national promotions, and in innovation. And that was wonderful, you know. And then I kind of started to get the itch to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. But I'm the kind of person that believes, you know, if you want to kind of break the rules and think out of the box, you kind of have to know what's in the box first.
Yep.
And I think that's the wonderful thing about a big corporation like PepsiCo or even Henkel. You know, these companies are very rigorous around their approach and how they think about business. And for me, PepsiCo really was the foundation of my career. The people I got to work with, the experiences that they offered me, the training, quite frankly, that they gave me. And I really got to feel I really understood what was in the box. And that was time to think a little bit differently and maybe break the script. And for me, a smaller company was the way to go. And I went to Sun Products, which was PepsiCo's a $70 billion company. Sun was about $1.5 billion company, so quite a bit smaller. And there, they really liked my diverse experience. And they creatively came up with the idea of putting together multiple disciplines. And this is about 4 years ago, and this is when omni-channel was really just starting to take place. And they said, gosh, we need somebody to come in here and not only raise the effectiveness of various marketing services functions like digital marketing and shopper marketing and national promotions and in-store merchandising, but we need somebody who's got the creativity to be able to bring those groups together so that they can become a force multiplier for our business.
Right.
And that worked out wonderfully well. And then Henkel, you know, spotted this little jewel of a company also here in Connecticut, in Wilton, Connecticut, and they bought us, which was really what we all wanted. We were private equity backed, and that was the plan. And Henkel liked what my team was doing and some of the work we were doing. They said, gee, you know, let's put a little bit of gas on that. You know, why don't we bring some more groups into this omni-channel function? And that's when we brought in the media department. That's when we brought in visual branding, the consumer call center, which has been amazing. You know, the woman who runs that consumer call center, she sits right outside of my office, and I hear all the good and bad. And one of the really interesting things is that we get love letters for some of our brands. Wow. And we've actually decided for Persil in particular to build marketing campaigns around what consumers are actually pouring out to us. That's been wonderful. But to kind of put a fine point and answer your question, that's kind of my journey. That's how I got here. Henkel liked what they saw at Sun. They ignited that by really completing the puzzle and bringing all the pieces together for me to play with, so to speak. And we've had a lot of success.
That's just tremendous. And one of the things that we see a lot with big corporations is that facing those types of changes can be challenging. And it sounds like what your team here, but also what Henkel leadership has done, is recognize what you were bringing to the organization and what your team was bringing to the organization, and recognize that bigger changes would mean better improvements. I was very privileged to attend your talk at the AMA event a couple months ago, and one of the things that struck me there was how significant the operational changes you brought into the organization were. So I would love it if you could speak a little bit to what that process was like, what that journey was like, how you had to develop chains of communication with leadership, particularly back in Germany, and what that entire transformation process was like. I think that's an amazing story.
Thank you. And I think I was really blessed, quite frankly, with Henkel leadership, because it really does start at the top. And they created an environment to make all of this possible. I mean, in a typical organization, breaking down these silos, which really become little fiefdoms, right, of of jurisdiction and of people's kind of career and pride is a Herculean task. But at Henkel, that was easy, quite frankly.
Wow.
And I'm telling you that, and it's almost hard for me to believe it when I say it myself, but it really was easy. And I think it had something to do with the culture. You had leaders of these various departments that saw the vision, knew it made sense, and said, you know what, I'm going to give up a piece of my responsibility so that we can succeed in an area that that other companies may not be succeeding in. I think one of the neat things about Henkel, although we are a $20 billion company, we are market leaders in many places around the world. In the U.S., we are a challenger brand. You know, we are number 2, number 3 in various categories. And I think the people in the U.S. really understood that we have to think differently. And they're willing to make the sacrifice, give up a little bit of jurisdiction to do the right thing and put these groups together. You know, Henkel's, really mission from a corporate perspective is to be more agile. It is to be more digital. It is to break down silos. And so this was a natural project. And so I think that culture enabled this to happen. But then the next step is making it happen.
Right. It's almost a miracle, sitting on my side. So we do a lot of work with a lot of different organizations who are trying to reach this point. And it can be a real challenge to handle those fiefdoms, and to talk to those sort of feudal lords and try to get them to understand that if they are willing to bend a little bit, over time, their role will actually grow, and the company will grow because they're able to do that. But that can be a tough sell. So it's a sort of amazing and brilliant and miraculous that was able to happen as smoothly as it was here. I would like to go back to what you mentioned a little bit ago about these love letters and this idea of the customer experience and connecting with the customer, and how you do that. I'd love to hear more about how your team reaches out to the consumer, the types of research that you do, and the types of communications and conversations that you facilitate.
Sure. Well, it is all about consumer centricity, right? It is all about it's really a paradigm shift. It's moving from beating your brand chest and feeling brand is hero to really being an enabler of the consumer. The consumer is hero. I like to think of the brand's role is really Yoda's role to Luke Skywalker.
Right.
Luke Skywalker being the consumer, right? How can we provide a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of guidance that helps the consumer along their own personal path to achievement? And it's setting up an organization and it's staffing it with people with that sensitivity, right? Who are going to have really listen to what the consumer is saying, and then take actions that really deliver against the big problems that the consumer is facing in a way that feels authentic to the category and to the brands. So for me, the first step is really getting people's heads, at least on my team, and then other teams as well, as you kind of evangelize. We are not the hero, right? The consumer is the hero. The consumer is in total control, so we might as well just admit that right now. They're filtering our messages either physically or mentally. They become human filters, right? I think we need to start moving away from being the thing that interrupts what they're interested in from a consumer communication perspective to being the thing that they're actually interested in. And I think you'll even notice in your own personal experience, there are probably ads that you watch and ads that you experience that make you laugh,
right? That
maybe even teach you a little bit about something or pull at the heartstrings. How can we do more of that? And how can we leverage digital capabilities to tell more immersive stories than a 30-second spot can do? And so that's the path that we're really pursuing. And in order to do that, to get back to your question in terms of how, you really have to understand what are those pain points. And you can't look at them through a filter of, initially at least, of what you have the authority to talk about.
Right.
You just have to understand, what is my consumer experiencing? What are the big macro trends that are affecting them personally? And once you have a deep understanding of that, then you can step back and you can add your filters. Where do we have a brand authority to lean in and help become a solution provider beyond the basic features and benefits of the product, right? That's important, and there's room for that story. You must tell that story.
Right.
That's lower funnel.
Yeah.
How do I fill the funnel with more people? How do I attract them to my brand? In many cases, it's not going to be about, the fact that I am a better whitener and brightener, right? Because that's kind of tickets to the game. How can I make an emotional connection in a way that stops you, gets you to think? And I think there are brands that have done that really, really well. Like we all know Dove and what they've done. And there are many brands that are really getting into the space, and some are succeeding really well. We want to be one of them. And we're leveraging actually artificial intelligence to understand what's on consumers' minds. Certainly we have a research department here, and they're wonderful. And the person that runs that group is my partner in crime, and I don't go too far without him. But we're also doing more non-traditional things, at least now they're non-traditional, beyond surveys. And we're looking at what people are reading, what people are saying, what the sentiment is. And artificial intelligence is a wonderful way of collecting reams and reams of data over many, many years and understanding the trajectory of various conversations so that the big problems can be extrapolated. And you get, I think, a pretty authentic picture of where your consumer's head and heart is.
Right. That's fascinating, and there's a million themes in what you just said that I would love to touch on. I don't know that we'll have time for all of them, but in terms of using artificial intelligence for essentially sense making is what you're talking about. We're looking at the oceans of data that most companies have now in various places, in various warehouses, and using new tools to take a look at that data and start to understand from a quantitative perspective what the consumer is doing and needing and reading and looking at. I'm wondering if you layer that in with qualitative at all, and how those two twains perhaps meet here at Henkel is a question. And I'd also, in terms of sense making, I want to go back to that, what you were talking about in terms of the funnel and in terms of looking at the entire consumer journey. I think it's really easy for big corporations to look at the journey through a marketing lens, meaning looking at every touch point along the way, every experience of the consumer as, how can we sell more to them at this moment in time? And what you're talking about is taking a much broader view, a much more humanist view of that, and putting together an honest view of the customer from start to finish and their pain points, and then going back and saying, okay, how can we support the consumer at various points in that journey? I think that's really remarkable, and I think it's unusual in terms of what I've seen with my work. So I would love it if you could talk particularly to the question of sense making with AI and how you use different types of research and analysis. And then if you do want to have anything else to say about the customer journey, that's also something I would certainly like to throw out there.
Sure. And maybe I'll just start with that piece and then move into the AI, because it all does start with the consumer. And I think it really is understanding the pain points, right? What are the predictable pain points that people are feeling throughout their kind of path to purchase as it pertains to your brands, and where are they going to solve those pain points? To your point, those consumer touch points. That's really important, and I think consumer journey mapping is really foundational to this type of work. As it gets into the AI, that's where that's going to help you, right? Understand some of these pain points, and working with the right company is really important, because a lot of this is still, although AI in and of itself has been around for 50 years, it really isn't till the last, let's say, 6, 7, 8 years that it's really scaled, right, with the massive computational power that's now available, advanced algorithms, and quite frankly, all the data that just wasn't around 50 years ago. I mean, 90% of the world's data was generated in the last 5 years, because we're creating it all with all the digital interactions that we're having. So, so it's still a relatively new discipline in its current form. Having the right partner is super important. And so for us, we are working with a company called R4 in Connecticut, in Ridgefield, Connecticut. They were created by the founders of Priceline.com.
Right.
So already that gave them some credibility with us. And we vetted them for a number of months to really make sure that they were the right firm to help us on this journey, because it can be awfully confusing. And we've been able to leverage their capabilities to surface insights that otherwise would really have been impossible for us to find.
Wow.
It's really about connecting dots where you didn't even know dots existed,
right,
quite frankly.
Right. That's fascinating. That's really good stuff. And I'm sure that R4 will be grateful for the shout out. I know from the talk that you gave that you have done some just phenomenal consumer-centric marketing, highly personalized marketing. I would love it if you could speak a little bit to some of those efforts and what went into them and what some of the results were.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know personalization is what it's all about, but you don't want to cross that line into creepy, the creepy place.
Right.
So AI has helped us quite a bit. One of the projects we're working on right now is to really find the hidden Persil consumer. So Persil is a big global brand. It's a fledgling brand in this company with about a 3.5 share. The neat thing about the brand is it has tremendously high repeat, over 55% repeat rate, which is really unusual. So we have a real penchant for trying to find who is the person that would just love this product, and how do we dig a moat around them with advertising so we get them to buy. Instead of the spray and pray method, and as challenger brands, we just don't have enough fuel in the tank to make that last. So we leverage artificial intelligence to understand, where the high potential Persil consumers live around some of our key retailers, right? Because you always want to connect everything to your big customers. Sure. And the AI is able to tell us not only at the zip code and the block group level where these people live, but we get a sense of the attributes that make up these communities, right? And the people that live in them. That's what the AI tells you. So it may tell you, for example, that in a particular zip code and at a particular block level, you've got a lot of gyms, workout facilities. You've got people that are very health conscious. So we use that information to build personas. And in another block group, in another zip code, you might find, hey, this is actually an up-and-coming area in transition that's moving from kind of one end of the economic spectrum to another. And it's attracting people who are maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit more affluent, with interests, let's say, in dining and eating out, right? So you learn a little bit about the people and places in these key geographies. And then you can tailor your message, right? So in this particular example, we can frame the power of Persil and the deep clean that this brand gives you within the context of a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
Within the context of foodies, right? I mean, if you're a foodie like me, you get pretty messy, right?
Right.
So if I receive an ad that's depicting or mirroring my life a little bit and my enjoyment of food, and sometimes mishaps that go along with that, then I'm more open to that ad, right? So it's personal, yet it's not too personal.
Right.
And what we've been able to do is actually leverage creative dynamic optimization to develop very highly personalized ads that bring in the local price point, right, for a particular product. They'll bring in a retail location with maps. And we've been able to develop, for one campaign, over 400,000 personalized ads.
Wow.
Right? So that the consumer receives the ad, they see the locations in their area that sell our product, they can pick the location they want, a map comes up which takes them right there.
That's remarkable.
The right product for them and the right size at the right price point, or the price point in that marketplace, pops up.
Right.
And so that's another way of being personal, but not being creepy.
Yeah, this is just tremendous stuff. And I love where you're coming from as a challenger brand, because we hear a lot from some smaller organizations that it feels like AI is only for the big companies, the number one in the market types of companies, or that personalization is out of reach. And what I'm hearing is that by combining artificial intelligence, combining technology and personalization with a deep understanding of the customer experience, you can be more targeted about your application of that technology. So maybe it's not a wholesale, I'm installing Watson at every possible level of the organization. It's how can I deploy these selected technologies in service of the customer experience?
100%. How do I create an environment, a virtuous circle of engagement, rather a vicious circle of engagement? So the vicious circle of engagement, if I'm the consumer and I put myself in their shoes, is that you keep serving me ads with no understanding of who I am, even though I'm your customer.
Right.
So it feels like we're continually starting the relationship over.
Right.
Versus if you know something about me, we never start the relationship over. We're always starting from an informed place. So how do you do that? Well, with technology, like we've been talking about, artificial intelligence and the like to glean the insights, but where do you house this information? So whether it's in a data lake or we have a DMP, a data management platform, where we're ingesting lots of data. And to your earlier point, even the qualitative and quantitative data. We have segmentations that are very important to us, right? That are qualitative in nature. Quantitative in nature. We bring that information into our DMP and we blend it with other things, other data points, all the artificial intelligence data, media interaction data that we have, goes into the DMP where we can sort it and make sense of it and further build out our segmentation, our personas. So no longer do you have to just rely on one or the other. You can bring all of these worlds together in one location and sift and sort and make sense and then action on it.
Right. Yeah, building in a cycle with the DMP at the center.
Yes.
A cycle of the quantitative and the qualitative feeding each other and, ultimately improving the results and what you're able to perceive out of that data.
100%.
Yeah, really, really interesting stuff. And very thoughtful stuff. That we're still at a juncture in this kind of industry, in the world of customer experience, where there's a lot of very nascent thinking, a lot of very nascent platforms, people kind of trying to tie together a lot of different threads into one cohesive unit. And the thinking here that you guys are doing at Henkel is really sophisticated and very holistic. So it's very exciting to see. And I think makes you stand out in a field that's relatively crowded.
Well, thank you. And I hope you're getting from this conversation that while we're doing a lot within technology, it all starts with people. Everything starts with people.
Absolutely.
From the way we started this conversation around the structure of our organization, who do we have the right people on the bus, right? Have we hired right? Do we have people who have the sensibility and this passion to put the consumer first and not just pay lip service to that, but to really believe the better we know the consumer, the deeper we can create a bond with them, the better our business will be.
And have that empathy too.
You have to have that empathy.
We're starting to get to a point now where our job descriptions have to include things about empathy and about listening and about being customer centric, whereas 10 years ago or even fewer years ago, that never came up. We never interviewed for empathy, and now we really have to.
Well, that's a great point, because you can start your customer centricity right here in your office every day.
Yep.
And one of our principles here, or our values, and we have a value system here at Henkel. We call it a success seeker value system. And one of them is all around connecting with respect, right? So how can I treat you not as a thing, but as a person?
Right.
How can I know you well enough, to the degree that you want to be known, and treat you in a way that makes you feel that your individuality as a person, as an employee, is respected?
Right.
How can I help you build your career here so that it's, we're creating a win-win scenario? And that this type of empathy and emotional intelligence needs to be practiced at work
Right.
if it's going to work outside. You
Absolutely.
can't speak with two different voices. It's amazing to me where I'll see, commercials on TV for major corporations, and they'll be all about the consumer and how much they're plugged into the consumer, and then you have an interaction with them, and it feels anything but.
Right.
And I wonder what it's like to work for them as well. It all has to tie together. You have to treat your employees the way you want your customers to feel, the way you want consumers to feel. It all has to kind of jive in the same kind of pot.
Yeah, it's completely antithetical to the Taylorism of the Industrial Revolution, where a human was treated like a cog in a machine, and there are a lot of organizations that still act like that still look at productivity as if it's as if we in an office building are the same as a widget on a conveyor belt, and that's really destructive. It's destructive to the individuals. It's also destructive, I would imagine, to the organizations.
I would think so too. Now it does require a different type of employee.
Right. Yep.
An employee that doesn't need to be micromanaged. An employee that's not looking to kind of game the system. Right. So we have a very rigorous hiring process here, and I'm looking for A players. And for me, A players are people who are really ambitious. I want people who want to make money for themselves and for the company. I want people who want to rise within the organization. That's awesome. I love that. But they also have to be willing to do it the right way, and take others with you. I want people who are intellectually curious, people who are just restless, and they want to bring outside knowledge into the organization and make everybody better. So there's certain criteria that we have as we're screening, because you need a level of maturity, right, on both ends.
Yep. Yeah, those all excellent points. And I would love to now get your opinion on what you think we're looking at down the line. What's on the horizon for us in the customer experience field? What are we going to be grappling with? What's going to be exciting about the next 5 or even 10 years out for us working here in this field?
Well, I think we all can see plainly that the physical experience isn't going anywhere, right? Retail stores are a critical component of the consumer journey, and many of them are thriving, and we see online players, like Amazon buying, retail locations in Whole Foods, and I think that is a trend that is going to continue, and kind of more specifically, it's this blending of the physical world, the terrestrial world, with the digital world, and that will come together in increasingly exciting ways that will enable us to do more,
right?
As business leaders, as consumers. You see it right now with autonomous vehicles and robotics, where artificial intelligence is coming together in the physical world and creating things that I think felt like science fiction a few years ago.
True.
And they're reality today.
So that's fascinating, and I feel like autonomous cars are coming up every 5 minutes. They're clearly something that is on everybody's mind, from having to think about things like energy storage and batteries to having, in this universe, to having to think about fabrics and entertainment systems in cars, that really were not anything that existed 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's a whole nother world. So that's some really interesting stuff. And I think most of us can connect the dots also then into that artificial intelligence universe and that customer experience universe, when you start to look at being able to gain a perspective on an individual's life, where they are offline, where they are digitally most of the time at the same time, where they are in a car, what they're doing in their home. Again, we always have to be careful not to be invasive, but to be able to paint that kind of a picture is very exciting from a marketer standpoint, certainly.
I think so. You think about some of the biotech, that's coming out with regards to infusion into clothing and being able to save lives by alerting people that you might be having a particular issue, go see the doctor, if something doesn't feel right. So I think there's all kinds of very exciting places that we can go. And you're right, there's a fine line between being creepy and not, but we do know that consumers want personalization. Think about yourself, and and the personalization that Google gives you or Netflix gives you, or Amazon gives you. This personalization enables you to move quicker through your shopping experience, through your entertainment experience, to get to where you want to be. So we all are kind of hooked on this idea of personalization. We want more of it. We just don't want it to be, to your point, invasive or to feel violating in any way.
Right, absolutely. So one of the other things that we're doing with this podcast is talking to companies that are a big presence in Connecticut. We're a small state. We're between New York and Boston. A lot of people kind of think of us as a pass-through state, but over the course of these conversations, we've really discovered that there's some real leadership going on in Connecticut. There are some people who are thinking very deeply about the customer experience, about their organizations, how that's going to play out in the industry, but also in our actual geographical location. So I'd love to hear, how you feel about the state, where you think we are, what some of the opportunities and maybe even what some of those challenges might be.
Well, personally, I love the state. I grew up in New York, which borders Connecticut, and spent a lot of time in Connecticut working and playing, and family in Connecticut. So for me, the sheer beauty of the state, the natural resources that the state has are really second to none, and I get a lot of personal enjoyment about being here, and I find it to be very fulfilling, and it does restore me. I think the state as a whole has some headwinds, and there's some tailwinds, right? I think from a headwinds perspective, I think taxes, certainly from a corporate perspective, from an individual perspective, are a bit of a pinch point. I think that infrastructure throughout the state as a whole, also a bit of a pinch point. But right here in Fairfield County, and if you look at the municipalities, there's a different story, right, to be told. If you look right here in Fairfield, you've got Stamford, you've got Wilton, you've got Ridgefield, you have Westport, right? These communities are very, very business friendly, right? And they attract, first of all, you've got a very intellectual and intelligent marketplace to pull from, right? Henkel could have been anywhere, right? They could have been anywhere in this country, and they chose Connecticut. Largely because of the people that reside here. They're very smart, and we want smart people. You also have universities, in this area. I mean, I don't think you can throw a stone too far without hitting a university, and that says a lot about the state. We've done some work with UConn on some mentorship programs where I think we've gotten as much as the students have gotten, and that's enabled us to think a little bit differently, so that's been really wonderful. All of these municipalities within Fairfield County are a short train ride from Manhattan, which is great from an employee, from attracting employees and retaining employees, but also being right at the center of the universe, quite frankly. Many of our agencies are in New York City. It's a short ride to get together with them. So I think Fairfield County in particular has a lot to offer corporations. It's a wonderful place for employees to live and play and work.
It sure is beautiful. That's for sure. There's no question about that. That's terrific. Thank you. And so my last question, and this is, I like to try to do a couple of thematic questions that I ask of everybody. And this is one of those. And I think these are some big shoes to fill at Henkel, but I would love to hear if you have any advice for organizations, whether they're small or large or challenger or not, advice for how to emulate some of the success that you've seen here, and people who might be trying to break into developing a customer experience group that's doing the kinds of things that your team is doing.
That's a great question, and I think it starts with honesty, quite frankly. I think it starts with individual corporations being really real, and that might start at a senior executive perspective, where you take a day and you go off-site with a facilitator, and you talk about how consumer-centric are you? What is consumer centricity? What are competitors in your space doing to become more consumer-centric? How would you plot yourself along a consumer centricity maturity map? What would be the components within that map, right, that you could break down to kind of better understand your own journey?
Right.
If you're at novice and expert is on the other way and it feels very far, well, what are the components that make a novice versus an intermediate versus an expert, right? So how can you chunk this stuff down? Once you've kind of done that, and I think that should be done in an environment where no idea is a bad idea, how could you start to envision being more consumer centric? What would have to be true within your organization to make some big fundamental changes? And I think in this part of the process, there should be, once again, no filtering, just lots of ideas. And then I would say, spend some time filtering and making it, once again, real and pragmatic, and then creating a real vision, for the organization, so it's clear to the rank and file what consumer centricity means, why it's important, who's doing it well, where are we on the maturity map of consumer centricity, what's it going to take to move there quickly over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and specifically scorecard. Not only a pie in the sky vision, but pragmatically, how is the organization going to change? What's success going to look like? And how are we going to measure success? And I think if leadership is able to do that type of thing, I think they'll get a lot of people to follow.
Right. That's a great answer. Honesty, I think, is possibly the best answer I've heard, for one thing. But I also like this idea of connecting these lofty visionary statements with real pragmatic success criteria, and even getting to the point of having a rubric. And it also sounds like that does need to be layered in with reevaluation, coming back every year and saying, okay, let's do this again. What have we done in the past year? What do we still need to do? Because without that component, it sounds like you could easily sort of get lost. So you do have to have that reconnection with the vision on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, and I would say probably quarterly at a minimum. It's really the scorecarding. We said we want it to be this, and we said it's going to take this, that, and the other thing. How are we doing against this, that, and the other thing? Right. We should be looking in. Individual teams should be checking in bi-weekly, and management should be looking quarterly, and explaining to the organization where we are on a quarter-by-quarter basis, so that there are no surprises and we all know where we are and where we need to be.
Yeah, that really vital and dynamic part of the process is critical. So this has been fantastic, Ken. I've really enjoyed our time together. I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be on the podcast and for participating in this conversation. Again, Ken Krasnow is the Vice President of Omnichannel Marketing at Henkel. If there's a way for any of our listeners to connect with you, are you on LinkedIn or anything? Can we provide a link to that?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn.
Great.
And you can come check me out there at Ken Krasnow on LinkedIn.
We'll provide a link in the show notes. You don't have to memorize it.
be happy to continue this conversation. And Katie, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
Terrific. Thank you so much.